This second panel, we want to talk about cloud as sort of the digital infrastructure for tomorrow's economy. And we looked at some research. Knight Frank is expecting data center supply in Malaysia to grow ninefold over the next 10 years to something like 900 megawatts. AWS recently made a big commitment to invest $6 billion by 2027. And this cloud adoption is going to also be driven by the more regional adoption of cloud, with Malaysia potentially supporting that regional role. IDC is also forecasting public cloud services to grow by 25%, potentially a $2.1 billion market by 2026. Cloud offers a capex-light model for corporates, with a lot of flexibility and the ability to scale quickly. And for smaller businesses, it offers enterprise-grade solutions, maybe at a more affordable entry price. Now, I just want to quickly introduce the panelists here. You may not be familiar with them. Firstly, let me introduce Azhar. He's the head of enterprise business for AWS Malaysia. AWS is a leading cloud infrastructure player. And also, in addition to the largest market share, they also have the broadest offering of cloud solutions with over 200 fully featured services. AWS has also announced 5 new AWS regions, and one will be in Malaysia. They've established a presence here since 2016, and Azhar and AWS have been spearheading the digital transformation in Malaysia. Some of their faster growing startups that they've enabled include Qasem and Fave, as well as supporting large enterprises like Petronas, Astro, Maxis, Bank Islam, and government agencies like Smart Selangor and the Department of Statistics. To my left, we have Henrik, who is the CEO of NTT Malaysia. Many of you may not know this, but NTT was one of the first companies in Malaysia to get MSC status back in 1997. Henrik has over 3 decades of experience in the Malaysian ICT ecosystem, and NTT, which is a global leader in networks, data centers, cloud security, and managed services, and also an innovator in private 5G, has over 80 data centers in 20 countries. And lastly, we have AirTrunk Deputy CEO, Michael Juniper. So full disclosure, AirTrunk is actually a distant relative of Macquarie. It's 88% owned by our infrastructure arm, Macquarie Asset Management. AirTrunk builds hyperscale data centers, and this year is committed to a 150 megawatt facility in Johor. Michael has been with AirTrunk since its inception and oversees AirTrunk's regional expansion across Asia Pacific, which has over 1.35 gigawatts of capacity and growing. So maybe I can kick off the session with a question for Azhar. There's quite a long list of accolades I just read off there, but maybe can you tell the audience one thing that they may not know about AWS?
Thanks, Ben, for having me. It's a privilege to be along Mike and Hendrik here. I think just you mentioned on the investment, just first off, it's our commitment to invest in Malaysia is until 2037. So it's $25 billion of investment over 15 years until 27. It's probably the largest investment from Amazon AWS perspective to date. And the investment, I think one thing to share with the audience here on the infrastructure side, it's a different model of investment. It's not a data center. I think what we are designing or establishing is this concept of region in each geographies that we operate. And in this region, it comprises of a minimum what we call availability zones. And in each of these physical location of availability zone or AZ, it comprises 1 or more data centers, right? And then each of these AZ is independently powered, they're independently cooled. It's got its own physical security. And I think what that means for customers, particularly enterprise customers, that you can run your applications, enterprise-grade applications, with high availability, with this assurance of 3 AZs for greater fault tolerance. I think a lot of maybe the audience or maybe people do not know, like when we talk about cloud infrastructure, it's not investment in a single data center in that traditional sense. It's more of a concept of region. So the 3 AZs that we're investing in Malaysia will add on top of the 99 AZs that Amazon AWS have already have deployed globally to date after 16 years of our existence.
Thanks, Asa. And maybe Henrik, I think NTT has been in Malaysia a long time, but you guys work behind the scenes. Maybe I don't know, a lot of the audience may not be aware of what you do here. Is there maybe something you can share that maybe the audience doesn't know about NTT?
I think many IT people knows about NTT, but today the audience are fairly investor-based or business people. NTT was one of the early pioneers that's invited to join Malaysia, the Digital Malaysia previous generation MSC in the mid-90s. We were the first one who acquired a piece of land in Cyberjaya. We built our first office in 1997, which is actually the same year of what MDEC office is. You can imagine in 1997, Cyberjaya is still a jungle. So we were like brother and sisters. So ever since then, we have been working with MDEC to develop the digital economy in Malaysia. In fact, last year when the government transitioned to Digital Malaysia rather than MSC, so we were awarded to be one of the most active participants over the 25 years of MSC with the government. One of the awards that were given to us. And of course, we will continue to work with the governments. So in 2001, we built the first DC in Cyberjaya. And many people do not know. We are just talking about 1 megawatts. That was like 20 over years ago. So that was the seat of the special built data center in Malaysia. So not many people know there is the first data center that NTT built outside of Japan. But today we have 160 plus data centers around the world. It's growing days and night. And this is the first outside Japan that we built. So over the years, the skill that the Malaysian learned in this data center, of course, people come and go and join another company. And over the last 20 years, it have helped to many investors that invested in data centers over the years. Many of these our friendly competitors who built data center, the skill was originated 20 over years ago. All the local people who learned the skill in our data centers. And over the years, we built a few data centers, and we are building the 6th one right now. Hopefully, and the data center have become the underlying infrastructures for the clouds, right? So that the cloud can actually move the region into Malaysia. They require these underlying infrastructures. So we actually sowed the seed 20 over years ago for the cloud player like Azhar to come in. So many people also think that we are a data center player, but the data center business is only 10% of our business. So the 90% of the business is helping our enterprises, our clients, implementing the digital infrastructures, looking at their network, looking at the securities, looking at their customer experience solutions, looking at the SAP, looking at the application, managing the SAP application. One of the big pieces of the business that we do is managing cloud infrastructure, managing cloud. So as clients move some of the workload over to the cloud, so they will have, there's still a requirement for specialists to actually manage the cloud workload. So we have built a very robust centralized delivery platform to help our clients managing the cloud. So that is actually the 90% of our business.
Thanks, Henrik. And from that long history, we have probably the youngest company on stage, Michael. Maybe you can share with us, I think a lot of people will be meeting you for the first time, getting to understand what AirTrunk does. Could you share a brief pitch on what AirTrunk's ambitions and aspirations are?
Sure, thanks, Ben. Nice to be here, everyone. Good afternoon. So AirTrunk's the biggest hyperscale data center business in Asia. So we've got operations all over Asia, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Basically, we provide data center solutions to the largest cloud service providers in the world. And we do that in many different regions, and certainly we just did our first announcement in Malaysia, with our project underway, which is our large 150 megawatt facility that you just mentioned before. And essentially, those large cloud service providers are working with corporates, enterprises and government customers to move their compute from on-premise to the cloud, which sits in our data centres. So we're all connected up here on the stage today for that reason. So in terms of sort of our portfolio, we operate within 5 countries. We've got 9 very large data centres, minimum sort of 50 megawatts going up to 300 megawatts. So we have a number of data centres in Australia, 1 data centre in Singapore, we're in Hong Kong, and we've got a couple of very large facilities up to 300 megawatts plus in Japan as well. And now, of course, we're here to talk about Malaysia. So we did our announcement more recently in Malaysia. So in terms of what our customers say about us, the large global cloud customers, they want to work with us for various different reasons over our peers, and a couple of those reasons are that we build fast and we're very scalable, so we don't go in and build 300 megawatts in one go. We build one building or one data hall for a particular customer, and then we scale as their business grows, so it's very cost effective for them and very flexible in that way. They also tell us they want to be our partner because of our excellence in operations. We're very reliable and trustworthy, and we never miss our SLAs. So they do like working with us in the long term. And we're also very flexible from a commercial point of view. So whether we do a traditional sort of co-location model or whether we move to a more BTS, a build-to-suit solution, we're always open to working with our customers on that sort of offering. So we've got, as you mentioned, 1.35 gigawatts of capacity to sell that's available across those 5 countries. We're always looking at new regions at any one time, and so sort of watch this space over the next couple of years. It's certainly been an exciting time. Our CAGR in terms of megawatts sold has been about 55% over 7 years, so a pretty aggressive and impressive growth profile over a 7-year period. We don't see that slowing down with the emergence of AI and a bunch of other things that we'll probably talk about today. We see that accelerating, if anything, so it's certainly an exciting time to be us. Just in terms of back to Malaysia, we've announced that 150 megawatt site in January. It'll be open mid-next year, so again, another exciting period for us. We're looking at other growth opportunities in Malaysia, and we think that we'll be spending in the billions of dollars in Malaysia over the coming years. So it's a pretty exciting time. It's multi-billion dollars, so it's certainly going to be a number of facilities in Malaysia, and we really believe in what the government is trying to do with the My Digital initiative here. And we want to back that and support that as much as we can, not just in Johor, but in other regions where it makes sense. Data centres make sense for the economy in any region for a number of reasons. Again, we'll touch on this, but not only are data centres excellent from a local employment point of view during construction, and we're always under construction because we're doing stage by stage. It's not unlike us to have 1,000 construction workers on site. But there are obviously many other benefits to the economy, obviously digitising the economy, making things more efficient and making business easier. But there are countless advantages of moving your workload into the cloud, as we'll talk about soon.
Thanks, Mike. Just a reminder to the audience, if you look at the back of your tag, there'll be a little QR code there that you can scan, and you can drop us some questions into Slido, and we'll be taking the Q&A a little later in this panel. So coming back to Azhar, so given AWS's footprint, you've made very sizable investments in Malaysia. Or you will be making very sizable investments in Malaysia. I want to kick off the one more question to you. Sort of where is global cloud adoption today? Where does Malaysia stand in comparison to this? And sort of what is the sort of outlook you have for this industry?
I mean, from our perspective, I think we just basically at the starting phase of this tectonic shift with cloud as a truly enabler for innovation. I think you heard like all this CAGR that Mike was talking about, 55% growth in terms of data center investment. There's a lot of macro studies out there, whether it's IDC, I think it's quoting like 25% CAGR growth in terms of growth in public cloud spend over the foreseeable coming future. One thing to cite, at least from this global and regional perspective, IDC is quoting in 2023 the increase in infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service on public cloud is going to be at 35% growth year on year. So definitely, I think we're seeing acceleration in terms of cloud adoption. Obviously, there are variations across the globe. Obviously, the first AWS public cloud was established in the US. There was, of course, the market maturity, but we're very encouraged from the Malaysia perspective with not just from the enterprise customers. I mean, some of our customers are here, Maxis, Astro. I think we're seeing a lot of acceleration also from the SMEs in adopting cloud, driven by the post-pandemic effect, trying to cater to the needs of the future customers, right? A lot more digital services, like an example of StoreHub, because of the MCO lockdown, was able to offer services for the F&B brick and mortar restaurants, ordering it online in a matter of 7 days, and then everything's scalable from that point. So the agility, it's more and more sought by not just the enterprise customers, but SMEs as well. And I think in last year, I think we signed also with the government, the first hyperscaler to do that, I think it was 9 March of 2022, the Cloud Framework Agreement, which then allows ministries and public sector to migrate to cloud and access hyperscale service from AWS as well. So a lot of momentum, we're very encouraged, but net, I think, from our kind of estimate, we're just at a single-digit percentage of what cloud could enable in terms of IT spend out there. So the market size is in billions, and we're just basically barely scratching the surface. So the potential upside is huge.
Thanks, Asa. And for Henrik, NTT straddles maybe a broader ecosystem, right? From on-prem to private cloud. What is the appetite for cloud in Malaysia, in your view? And do you think it has lagged more developed countries? And do you see this changing?
Yeah, that's personal opinion. I think the global pandemic have pushed Malaysian companies to the edge. So I think the last few years, we sort of catch up quite significantly. And I think knowing a few of these cloud players are investing in Malaysia, I expect that to accelerate further. So the challenge that we see with our client is the skill gap for the cloud. So today, many organizations, their current IT personnel have day-to-day job, they have operational issue to manage. And it's hard to take time to retrain and skill them to exploit the cloud features or the way cloud works, right? So that's why we position ourselves to help our clients or organizations to migrate to cloud. That's one thing. The second one is actually to operate the cloud efficiently. And of course, there are more things to optimize the cloud and to actually leverage all the cloud features to build new application to digitize the company. There's a lot of new way of developing applications in the cloud, and it's much easier to develop the cloud. I think we still have a skill gap. So I think we are positioning to help our client to do that. I think we will catch up. We'll catch up along the way, and in order to realize the full values of moving to cloud, it's not so simple of moving the workload to cloud. So it is leveraging the cloud infrastructure, the PaaS features, the SaaS, the software as a service, or all the key features, the AI, the analytics of the clouds to be able to leverage those and build into the current businesses. Right? That's what we think.
Thanks, Henrik. Michael, this question's for you. You have an interesting lens. You sort of look at it from a regional perspective. Your customers are the hyperscalers. What makes Malaysia special as an investment destination for public cloud, within the region?
Yeah, it's interesting. When you look at Malaysia, it's becoming a really important data center hub, in my view. If you sort of look at the history, and to give you some context, Malaysia initially was viewed by sort of Singaporeans as a bit of a spillover market. So you'd move into Johor and you'd provide data center capacity to cloud service providers because you couldn't do it in Singapore because of the moratorium. Things have since matured, and Malaysia is now standing up in its own right, and companies like AWS are developing their own availability zones. So that's very exciting. So I think Malaysia's positioned really, really well to capture a lot of that demand that maybe otherwise would have gone to Singapore. And now people like AWS, companies like AWS, are setting up their own availability zones. If you look at sort of what else is special about Malaysia, obviously land availability. There's we've received very strong support from government at all levels, federal and state government, which has been fantastic, and that's invited that foreign direct investment, which has really helped our investment in Johor. And finally, the big one is renewable energy. I think the federal government came out and said that by 2050, 70% of renewables are going to be used in Malaysia across the country. That's fantastic, and I can't emphasise how important that's going to be for us. Companies like AWS and Microsoft and all the other big cloud service providers are big users of electricity through our data centres and through other data centres. And we need to be very focused on sustainability and renewables and procuring renewable energy. And we can talk about that a little bit later. But that's an absolute focus for us. And we're in the right region in Malaysia. And Singapore doesn't have as many opportunities in terms of renewable energy because of the size of the country. But Malaysia certainly does have that land availability and that opportunity to sort of seize the day when it comes to renewables. So that's sort of the unique sort of selling proposition for Malaysia with respect to data centres, in my opinion.
You mentioned government support when you came in. How easy has it been to make these massive investments in Malaysia? Again, comparing us to maybe some of our peers in the region. If I need a smooth process.
Yeah, to be frank, looking back at AirTrunk since the inception, it's never easy entering any new market. So Malaysia's no different. I mean, you do due diligence and you spend time in the market. But Malaysia's been really no different. As I said, we've just received really good support at the federal level and at the state level, and that's really helped our investment. So I would say it's sort of no different to any other country, really. I mean, we sort of go through the whole business case. When we enter into a new market, we look at things like customer demand, which is probably the number one important factor. If there's no customer demand, we don't want to be in the region, obviously. Then we look at things like ability to execute, and we want to be able to execute and follow our value proposition accurately. So we execute, and we find our right partners who can design, build very quickly and in a very safe manner. And there's a bunch of other factors that we look at, the growth of the economy, IT usage and the movement to the cloud in each country is obviously important too. So there are a number of factors that we look at, but I wouldn't say that Malaysia was any more difficult than any of the other countries that we moved into.
Thanks. For Azhar, speaking of customer demand, your investments are quite sizable and certainly take a certain amount of risk making such big investments. You must see a lot of demand from Malaysia. I just want to understand, when you make these investment decisions, is it the demand in Malaysia that's driving it, or is it, strategic fitting in with AWS sort of regional portfolio and offering to its clients?
Yeah, so we work backwards from our customers and stakeholders, right? Not just enterprise, but startups, SMEs, and all that, including the public sector. So a lot of decisions like driving, firstly, we're investing ahead of the curve, like given all this potential of cloud accelerating as well. So we've been listening to our customers, and more, there are, like some customers prefer to store their data locally, and a lot of the digital services also expected to have even lower latency going forward. So the requirement for that is driven very much endemically by the needs of Malaysia. And so, that's part of our country first focus with the government as well. I think a lot that we trying to drive through this investment over the next 15 years, which is of course supported by the Cloud Framework Agreement that we have signed with government, with Mampu, is to be able to accelerate public sector innovation as well. So just to answer specifically your question, it's very much driven by the needs of our customers in Malaysia, giving them the option, one, to be able to store data locally in Malaysia, if they prefer to do that. And also number two is to even further lower the latency of some of digital services, whether it's OTT streaming, whether it's 5G use cases, or even the advances that we can do in internet banking as well.
Thanks. You talked about the needs of your customers, and I believe one of it is decarbonization. So maybe this is a question for both you and Michael. You talk a bit about what your customers expect from you when it comes to the kind of energy used to run the data centers, and maybe Michael, you can talk a bit about the sort of the energy opportunity here in Malaysia from a renewable energy perspective.
Yeah, sure. It's I'll talk about Malaysia, but I'll talk about the sort of portfolio more broadly because there are a couple of examples. So we work with our customers who are the large cloud service providers to find the right sort of energy solution where we can. It's a real challenge, and we're all getting better at it every year. So at AirTrunk, we've got a net zero carbon emissions policy by 2030, which is pretty aggressive, and we're working towards it any way we can. The approach is to find unique and innovative solutions that are a little bit outside the square, but it's certainly going to be a challenge. For example, in Malaysia, we're talking to a particular party about a PPA which would bring in direct renewable energy into our data centre, which would mean that particular facility would be running on 100% renewables, which is a pretty exciting project, but it's in its very early phase, and we need the support by state and federal government to make sure that those projects happen, because it's one thing talking about it, it's another thing actually executing it, and that's what we really need to do in Malaysia. And in my mind, for data centres to thrive and for the cloud to thrive, we need to make sure that we're doing so on the back of renewable energies, no matter what the project is and no matter what the solution is. It might be hydro, it might be anything else, but in my view, it's just about the most important thing. And all our customers talk about it in a similar way. They've all got similar targets to us, and so we need to work with them to make sure that we're procuring the right type of energy.
Yeah, just to complement Mike's comment on ESG, it's definitely top of mind. We're hearing this from our customers too. Like at Amazon level, I think we have even further stretched the net zero carbon commitment to be completely zero by 2040, which is 10 years ahead of Paris Agreement. And I think how we're going to get to that kind of very aspirational target is, number one, is to ensure that all of our infrastructure, whether it's AWS or Amazon fulfillment centers for the e-commerce business, is powered by renewable energy. 2024 by 80% renewable energy powered, and 2025 100% of all our facilities, including data centers, AWS regions that I talked about, 100% powered by renewable. And I think how that could help our customers is that when they use cloud, obviously in terms of scope 1 emission monitoring, that really help in terms of that decarbonization. Number two, we're also working on our own chip technology. We call it Graviton, that ensures better power, price performance and power efficiency as well. And typically what I think our customers are seeing when they run their infrastructure applications on cloud, it runs at 3.6 times more efficient, which is at 80% lower energy efficiency. So that's another way of accelerating towards decarbonization. And last but not least, with cloud, you can really architect your application much more efficiently in terms of agility, but in terms of, I guess, compute requirement and energy requirement as such. So there's multiple ways that we ourselves are committing to get to decarbonization, but also helping customers to get there. And all this, by the way, are reported on a monthly basis. As part of the billing, like your utility bill that you get from TNB, how customers get their invoices, but also shows the report in terms of how much carbon emission has been saved by using public cloud infrastructure at the same time. So that automatically reports without any extra cost on their efforts of decarbonization through cloud.
That's really interesting, and that's a commendable target to set. I hope you guys can achieve it, because it's definitely high on the agenda, even for Macquarie as well. Now, I have a question, slightly changing gears for Henrik. I know NTT does some investment in submarine cables around the world. So now cloud is already out of sight for most people. What more submarine cables? Could you share a bit of insight into how the submarine cable network gives a strategic advantage to a country? Obviously, we are behind Singapore, but how do you see this evolving going forward?
I think this morning we talked a lot about 5Gs and end user devices, the consumer or the corporate connectivities. but somehow, as a country, we need to have a lot of traffic out to the world or coming in from the world to even facilitate the cloud adoptions. So I think submarine cables has been there for years. I think many of the local telco did invested in those submarine cables. NTT is globally investing a lot of submarine cables, especially in APAC. Malaysia, we have about 2.5 years ago, we launched a submarine cable from Singapore to India. I'm glad that we managed to convince the group to branch out to Malaysia. So there will be a new submarine cable coming to our data centers. It likely to go live in the second half of this year. I don't see any delay for that. So hopefully that, as and when all this additional submarine cables and connectivities, it gives a lot more diversities to all the enterprises and also to the telcos and also to the OTT players. So diversity is good, more and more, lower latencies, maybe even lower costs, right? At the same time, we also, because of all this investment, we are able to interconnect all our data center around ASEAN. We talk about ASEAN working together. So we're going to interconnect all our data center in ASEAN with a very low latencies network, connecting our data center for our customers.
Thanks. And now, before we go into the Q&A, I guess we should touch on AI. It's a bit of a hot topic right now. So this one's for Azhar. Maybe could you give some insights into how you see the intersection between cloud and generative AI?
How much time do I have? Yeah, so definitely a hot topic right now on the Gen AI. Like in our 16 years of journey as well, I think AI, machine learning, we have a lot of deep relation with that. I think a lot of our primary customers, of course, Amazon.com, the e-commerce powered by AWS, and a lot of those machine learning and AI capabilities are built into like the Amazon search and all that. I think we're doing on the generative AI on the cloud side to enable a lot more, I would say, prevalent use of generative AI for customers in many different ways. I think number one is that we actually build our own chip, right? A computing chip. So what we've been working on, because this AI requires like really super trained deep learning that takes months. So in order to do that at a much faster pace, you need chips that can do that at much better exaflops, not even petaflops, right? So much faster and then at much lower cost. And I think that's what we're doing from AWS perspective to continue to drive that price performance. And I think we already launched a couple of chips, AWS Trainium, that can allow up to 30,000 chips in ultra cluster to be able to drive this deep learning in days as opposed to months. I think that's super exciting for a lot of startups that we work with. Startups like AI21 Lab. There's also like Stability AI and also Grammarly that are building what we call foundation models, right? That a lot of the other enterprise customers can access and harness the power of Gen AI through essentially API interface through cloud, right? And so on the chip side, that's more and more, I guess, possible now through this new generation of computing chips, Inferentia and Trainium. We're creating managed services called Amazon Bedrock, which allows customers, enterprise, SMEs, and all that to access all this machine learning and then basically foundation models for generative AI, so they can then ingest that and then harness that into their own applications. So there's a lot, in AWS, it's always day one, and we continue to innovate in that space. So I think there's a lot more that we can do. One more, which is in preview, by the way, I think generative AI can do wonders in terms of our software developers' productivity. Okay, if you think about it, it's creating content, stories, almost autonomously, right? And so what we are developing right now is called Amazon Code Whisperer. And essentially what that means is that software developer can just, using natural language, just give a comment to say, look, parse this CSV string together, and then the generative AI engine will write that on behalf of the software developers, because there's a lot of line of codes that are kind of like standardized, undifferentiated. So what that will allow then, going forward for developers, is to just more focus on differentiated coding, more creative kind of coding. And so that's another solution that we're thinking of for the broader impact of generative AI use case for companies. Yeah.
Thanks. Maybe we should have a separate session just on AI. So now into the Q&A that have come in, there's actually quite a few questions here. I'll try to consolidate some of them. But I think a really useful question here is, what are the differentiators on one data center provider to another? And maybe I can expand that a little bit, is also, what are the differentiators between, going from on-prem to cloud, right? Maybe between Azhar and Henrik, you can take this question.
Maybe I'll take the on-prem or cloud, because Asaha will tell you that 100% clouds. So we believe hybrid cloud is here to stay. The edge computing may not grow as fast as the cloud. It's globally, I think, in the range of single-digit growth. But there are certain workloads that they need to stay on the on-prem, right, to power some of the specialized workload in the manufacturing world, and those will continue to stay. So, but that created a very complex scenario for many organizations where they will have on-prem edge computing, then they will have multiple cloud because of software as a service. And when they sign up some of the software, each of these software run on different cloud. So they ended up have to manage multiple cloud, and they ended up have to manage the edge computing as well. But at the same time, the users change from in the office, then to their partners, and to the people traveling, and to everyone working from home, and also connected to the outside world and their partners. So the users are everywhere, and they have multiple computes to manage. So, and also it created a huge impact to their network topologies or their security postures. So all these things need to be changed. So because of that, we entity actually present ourselves to have our client to move into this environment. And we have them to assess the network impact, the security impact, and various impact. So we strongly believe hybrid cloud is going to stay. And we are building capabilities around all this to tackle an end-to-end for our client. So that's what we are doing today.
Yeah, I mean, I agree also with the fact that I think hybrid cloud is going to stay. There will be some applications that require that ultra-low latency needs to be on premises. But the argument for the value of cloud is undeniable in terms of you're trading now, like having to commit to upfront capital capex to a variable pay-as-you-go model. That's super attractive to a lot, and we've seen a lot of cost efficiency as well with customers moving from on-prem to cloud. But I think the biggest differentiator is the agility that businesses, organizations are seeing with cloud. I mean, obviously, the scalability is there, right? Once you go to cloud, for you to expand your business regionally and globally, you can do that in a matter of minutes, as opposed to having to order months in advance and set up another, on-premise data center, another location. So that scalability and agility to react to business need, it's super powerful. And again, coming back to the model, I think customers, organizations are needing to focus on what drives the business, which is reinventing their end customers' experiences. And so by moving to the cloud, public cloud in particular, it will remove that undifferentiated heavy lifting of managing your own IT stack, updating the patch, cooling and all that, and then that should ideally be managed, as a utility, as a service, going forward, in our view.
Thanks. Mike, this one I think best for you to answer. What are the economics for this sort of data center investment? Maybe you can break down a little bit about how much you're spending on the infrastructure, the networking, the racks, maybe something along those lines. And maybe you can give us a sense of how profitable this is.
I'm not going to be able to talk about anything confidential. We're a private company in terms of profitability, but certainly I can say that data centers are extremely capex intensive, and we've had to work through with our board and Macquarie, and they've been extremely supportive, which is fantastic in our growth across the region. We stop at the data center mech level, if you like. So we don't get involved with racks and networks components. We bring fibre in, we bring power in. As a hyperscale data centre provider, we've got HV infrastructure on site, so we've got security of power for the future for our customers. We build the core and shell based on what our customers' designs are, so we'll work with one of the large cloud service providers to understand their core and shell requirement, and then the overlay being the mechanical and electrical infrastructure. From there, we leave it to our customers to fit out their servers. So I can't talk to their costs and their economics, but we certainly look at a certain return on invested capital for each market. We've agreed with Macquarie what that needs to be for each market. I'm not going to talk too much about what those numbers are, but that's sort of all I can give you, Ben, on in terms of economics. It's all a bit confidential.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Now coming back to AI, we've got a question that just came in on it. How does AI change how you build and develop data centers, and maybe extend to how you market it as well? Maybe this question for Asa.
Let me jump in, and perhaps Azhar, if you've got anything to supplement, go ahead. But so we're working with 3 or 4 customers at the moment. As I said, AI is just such a hot topic at the moment, and it's moving every day, every week. So we're working with 3 customers in particular on their AI spec, and it's really interesting to sort of evaluate that. And we're going through, day by day meeting and sessions with our engineers to understand what the AI spec looks like relative to a normal compute spec. So look, again, it's all confidential, and I can't get into too much details, but some of the obvious things are they're all after liquid cooling. They're all much higher density in terms of the density of the amount of kilowatts they put through a rack. And they actually, overall, as a general comment, they're all a bit different, but they like to separate their compute to AI. So if you've got a large data center like we build, they would prefer a building for compute and a separate building for AI. That's probably all I can say.
Yeah, I gave a lot of comments on generative AI before, but I think truly how AI is going to change the future in terms of customer experience. I think it's all around productivity, because a lot of those things can be done provided that we train the models correctly, and it requires a lot of data set, right? And it cannot be like US-centric data set. It's got to be regionally relevant. But if it's done right, it can really automate those undifferentiated, repetitive things to be done by machines rather than human, that can ensure more consistent experience, whether it's customer interaction, whether it's making recommendation, things of that nature. But I think there's a lot of areas that we can impact through AI. It's still early days, I think, and productivity is going to be hugely impacted once AI is more and more prominent in a lot of the applications that we build.
Thanks. This question's for Henrik, and again, I'm compiling a few questions together. So basically, you've been here a long time, you've seen Cyberjaya evolve, and maybe there's some lessons we can learn from how it's evolved over time. Now, what lessons should we learn, and what can we do differently going forward to make sure that we really enable Malaysia to be this hub, for cloud investment and data centers? And just as a side note, there's also a mention about how we missed out on the apricot subsea cable. So just putting that out there as context as well.
Well, it's a very tough question.
Yeah.
So obviously the things happened for the last 25 years. It's probably going to happen in 2-3 years, in today's speed. So it's kind of hard to sort of leverage or learn from history. Things are moving so fast, and our friends is already talking about AI and using the AI engines to build applications, and building the specialized data center for AI chips, right? We never thought of all this, but one of the key things over the years, the government support for the infrastructure is very important. So I think we entity very lucky to have a strong support from the government, especially MDEC, which is our dear neighbors who have been given a lot of priority to us. Example, bringing in specialists for certain things. We do have expect very small numbers, but we can easily, they can help us. Even during the pandemics, they help us to get the expect in to help us in many things. So I think the continuous government involvement to build digital Malaysia, I think is very, very important, right? So when it comes to AI, there's a separate topic that we try to use AI. I talk about managing cloud workload. We do have a centralized system and platform, and we collect a lot of data set from the operational perspective. So we have something called AI Ops that it helps us to automate some of the operation decision. So that's still an infancy stage, but we have been adopting that. So hopefully in the next few years, we will have more and more AI-led kind of projects to be in place in Malaysia. So I think the people, building the skill is still a challenge. Building skills, digital skill is to remain a challenge for us compared to some of the countries, right? Example, India. You know. In fact, if you ask me, our cost structure today already, we have benchmark on people cost structures. We are already very, very close to India. So our cost structure is quite similar, and just that we don't have the numbers or the quantity of the skill label that we need. Right? So having said that, we do have a large group of people in our company exporting the services, supporting businesses in the US, supporting businesses in Japan, even supporting businesses in Germany, that we have a big team. We have close to 500 people, at least 500-600 people are doing that right now. Not supporting in Malaysia, but supporting overseas business. We are quite proud of exporting these services as well.
Yeah, job creation, definitely one of the positive spillovers from all these investments. For Mike, question again on energy. Is there any preference on how you set up your energy procurement, thinking along PPAs? Would you rather have an on-site, fully committed, solar plant, for example, buying from the grid? Just any color here.
No direct preference, and I think we've got to be nimble and flexible depending on the country in which we're operating. So Singapore has a very different proposition to Australia, to Malaysia, Japan, Hong Kong, etc. So we need, as I said before, we need to stay nimble and sort of find solutions that are different in each country depending on the environment and the climate in each country and what's available in terms of renewable in each country, including government regulations and the like. So there's not one single solution. I will say, just as an example, we announced about 6 months ago in partnership with Microsoft and CLP in Hong Kong that so we've got a data center in Shenzhen, one of our smaller data centers, but it's now operating 100% on renewable energy with the help of CLP, their local power provider, and Microsoft and AirTrunk. So that was a very unique solution that we were able to develop there, essentially an hourly matching system based on the hourly consumption used in the data center that is then converted into renewable energy. So a very smart and unique energy solution in Hong Kong, and I understand the first in Asia. Certainly, as I mentioned before, we're looking at PPA type solutions in Malaysia, but also in Australia. So there's no sort of one size fits all. There's too many factors and too many sort of characteristics to look at. So we certainly, when we do go through our site selection process and decide that we're going to build on a particular parcel of land, we've always got a solution in mind in terms of renewables that's preferred, but it depends on the location.
That's very clear. Thank you. So now we're just mindful of time. So I'd like to move on to closing remarks. So maybe I'll start off with Azhar for closing remarks, and I maybe give you 2 minutes. What's your elevator pitch, for cloud adoption?
Yeah, 2 minutes. Anyway, I think we are truly in exciting times. I mentioned that before. I think potentially this is once in a generational opportunity to transform not just communities, the country, at large as well. I think we're doing our part from AWS, Amazon to invest ahead of that growth curve through this cloud infrastructure. But cloud is just an enabler. There's a lot more to be done out there. So we're looking forward to working with customers across all different industries, across all imaginable use cases. Of course, with the 5G coming in to increase the connectivity as well. And I think through this cloud, through this 5G rollout, and through the digital first thinking of all the organizations in Malaysia, private and public, I think we can unlock a lot more innovation together to drive a more digitally inclusive Malaysia, to put Malaysia in the forefront of digital e-commerce as well, towards our ambition to be high income, digital driven by 2030, right? As part of the My Digital. So that's our wish, and that's how we're doing our part by investing ahead of the curve here in Malaysia. So pretty excited about the growth ahead, and we remain committed with that mission that we have in the country.
Thanks. And Henrik, any closing remarks from you, and maybe the outlook, right?
I think
your perspective. Yeah.
NDT have invested in Malaysia for like 20 plus years. We will not stop. As we speak, we're completing a new block of data centers. Of course, we are also looking at other opportunities. But on top of my mind, I have other agendas. For example, building up a team to support the overseas businesses. The group as a company operating in 70, 80 countries, shared services is important. And I hope to bring more and more services back to the country to help the digital transformation for the country, the digital economy for Malaysia. I think that's my personal pledge to help in the ICT space. Right.
Thanks. And so, Mike, you've heard the pitches from these two gentlemen. You're the only panelist who isn't based in Malaysia. So maybe for your closing remarks, how do you feel, about the future of Malaysia, with this sort of big investments, big change coming through on this front?
Yeah, I'll be quick, but super optimistic about our investment in Malaysia. We did a lot of work last year before we announced in January that we're going to move into Johor, but we're looking already at further opportunities in Malaysia. I guess, parting comment, I'm just very thankful for all the support that we've got across, federal, state governments, Invest Johor. All of our partners and stakeholders in the region have been fantastic. We're excited now that we're here. We can grow the business just like we have in all the other countries we're in. And so I'm just very thankful for that. That's the first comment. The second comment is, and we've touched on it enough, I think, but AI is coming and it's extremely exciting. It's going to really change the landscape of the data center business, and what AirTrunk and our peers are going to have to do to keep up with that demand is going to be pretty interesting and pretty exciting.
All right, and that's the session.